Good evening, everybody, and welcome to a new episode of True Crime with Sarge. I'm your host, Joseph Jackalone, and with us tonight we have Kenneth Strange Jr., who is a former FBI agent, Department of Justice Special Agent. He worked white collar crime cases or fraud cases. He worked in the FBI Joint Terrorism Task Force, also known as JTTF for short. There's going to be a lot of alphabet soup probably tonight. We're going to explain it all to you. And if we forget, just put it in the comments if we name something you don't know. He's also the author of an exciting book, A Cop's Son, One G Man's Fight Against Jihad, Global Fraud, and the Cartels. Listen, we are going to have a great time tonight because the stories that are going to be talking about tonight between terrorism and different historical figures in here, it's going to be pretty amazing. Ken, welcome to the show.
Hey, Sarge, thanks so much. It's a real pleasure to be with you.
So, yeah, you're out on the West Coast. I'm out here on the East Coast. And in between, we have everybody else. Well, we're just doing this tonight. But listen, just the title of your book, we know that your dad plays a huge influence in your decision to become a law enforcement officer, of course. But let's tell us a little bit about your dad and how he influenced you and you get into this kind of line of work.
Yeah. What an amazing man. I mean, of course, I would see him as a police officer, but when he did come home to us, to the family of five, and I was the oldest of the five. And this was all in Brooklyn. But when he did come home, when he did come off the midnight to 8 or the 8 to 4 or whatever the shift was, he always made time for his family. I mean, he would take my brother and I out into the street, and he'd throw the football with us or go to a park. He was always there. I mean, he was very responsive to his family. But, you knew that you were in the presence of frankly, my dad had this command presence even in the house. Although sometimes he could fool you. You'd come out of church with him and he'd give you a big hug and a kiss, and you're like, Dad, please take it easy. I have a reputation here in my elementary school. But Joe, he was a tremendous influence on all of us. But in that type of culture, when we would get together with his friends and go out to barbecues and the Police Athletic League and all those functions, and even the Holy Name Society. Okay, we go to church. All of those things, you got to meet cops, and they were my heroes. They were the good guys. I got a kind of a high being with them. And I was always excited to meet his friends and to go to the police station, pick up the paycheck, go to motorcycle precinct number 2 over on Flatbush Avenue and see all these guys on these 1,200 Harleys. It was just an adrenaline thing for me to see that. But Dad was a tremendous influence and a good man.
Right. No, I mean, and I saw that he was in the 6'3". He was a squad guy in the 6'3".
Yeah,
and then that was during the Son of Sam stuff.
That's right. Yeah, he was in the 6'3", commanding officer, and I remember that he talked about Son of Sam, and a lot of his work was with Chief Borelli. I think Borelli was
chief of detectives.
Yeah, so he was tied into that case. So my father was very high on Chief Borelli. He certainly liked him, but that was one of the big things in his career. And he had a 38-year storied career. I mean, from 1953 to 1991 and everything in between. So he saw so much stuff.
Yeah, and a lot of change in the department. So I want to take a quick shout out to Forrest Nelson. Thank you very much, Forrest, for that super sticker. So Dad was a big influence in your life in law enforcement, but you also had some other life stuff. You like to travel, and you learned about several languages too.
Yeah, so interesting. This man had a lot of interests, and truth be told, at one point in his life, at a very low point in his life, he got to the point where he was going to join and I think he actually walked through the doors of a Trappist monastery. It might have been in Staten Island, and he wanted to become a monk. And so he started to read voraciously all of these religious doctrines and authors like Thomas Merton and all that stuff. But he was also very much into sailboating and believe it or not, after sometimes he would come home from work on Long Island and he would go right to the boat, right down to the marina, and he would take off by himself. And I think that was kind of his therapy, that kind of getting away, and him and the boat and the sea and the wind and all that stuff. But he was a man of many talents, and he actually launched me into Spanish, which opened up all of these doors for me in my life. And it's kind of funny because, we're living in Brooklyn in this little row house in Brooklyn, and I wake up one morning and I hear my dad in the basement speaking Spanish. And I'm like, holy crap, what is he? So I go downstairs, and there he is with the 33 going around, and he's repeating Spanish, Arturo, Isabel. And he said, son, join me. And I got into it. I started, I wanted to imitate him, and I started to fall in love with Spanish. And those doors would open to me, and I'd end up a Spanish major in college. I became a Spanish teacher. So all of that because my father wanted to communicate with the Hispanic community over near Brooklyn College, over by the Junction, where we would get our haircuts, and he would try to communicate with Puerto Rican and Dominican barbers, and so yeah, he was into a lot of stuff.
Yeah, it's amazing, right? About how these little things can do this. My dad was a mechanic, and I got into cars that way. I mean, it was as simple as that. And I also had a boat, and it was also a great way of getting the stresses of police work off your back. You go down to the docks of the marina, you jump in your boat, and you just take off. So I know all about that kind of stuff,
Absolutely,
and
absolutely.
it's interesting. So but your Spanish, your teaching takes you on a much different journey, I'm sure, than you thought was going to go on. So tell us about that.
Yeah, I mean, in the back of my mind, Joe, I'd always wanted to be in the back of my mind, I always want to be a cop. But at one point in my life, with the Spanish, and I took a junior year abroad in Madrid, Spain. So that really cemented my language. And so I wanted to take a shot at teaching. And I just kind of fell into this opportunity on Long Island, where I was asked by some of the monks there, the Christian brothers, if I would come to LaSalle Military Academy, and if I would teach Spanish to the American kids, and then teach English as a second language to the foreigners. Those kids, and there were Iranians, and there were Nicaraguans, and this was an exclusive school, for families with money. And interesting because there was also kind of a mob. There was a mob connection to the school. The five families had their kids and their grandkids at the school. So there were Gambinos and this and that, and the other families. But yeah, that launched me, Joe. That got me into teaching English, teaching Spanish, and that would open another door in my life.
Right. So tell us about how you ended up in Saudi Arabia.
Okay. So, and this, I have a third book coming out called Land of Sand in 2026, which kind of takes you, it's kind of a comedy. It's a comedy, it's a travelogue, it's a love story. But I actually left my job at LaSalle Military Academy. I had been promised a teaching job with the public schools in the Bronx over on Jerome Avenue. And so I actually left LaSalle Military Academy. I resigned, and then the people in the junior high called me and said, "Hey, so sorry, funding has disappeared, and you can't work for. We'll keep your resume on file." So I was without a job. So now I'm scrambling around. I think I took a part-time security job in the town of Islip, Long Island, just to pay some bills. But then the next thing I know, I'm getting this offer to interview in Houston at the Saudi Arabian consulate, because I had sent some resumes to the Middle East. There were teaching positions at the universities in Kuwait and Saudi Arabia, and even over in Israel as well. So, I got this phone call, and it was a fellow named Shami. He was Palestinian. And he said, "Mr. Strange, I'm sorry you didn't get the university job with us, but you just don't have the experience. But would you like to interview for a job at a school for the royal family?" And so they flew me. They flew down to Houston, and I interviewed, and I got the job. So, I had been working at LaSalle, making $8,000 a year with a free lunch, and now I wasn't going to be working for that money with a free lunch. So I was going to be off on my own.
Right. So I mean, big jump, right, to go from Long Island, Brooklyn, Long Island, to Saudi Arabia.
Right.
and and you teach in the royal family and other high profile people's kids out there, right?
Exactly. I mean, these were, I would spend weekends at the palaces, and I learned quickly that there were kind of greater princes and lesser princes and beautiful princesses and things of that nature. Uh, but yeah, I mean, it was, and at the same time, I'm learning Arabic. I'm learning what the difference is between Sunnis and Shiites. And I also arrived just when the rebels took Mecca, took the Holy Mosque in Mecca. So I realized that this was an extremely volatile region. There was a lot of turbulence. And of course, it coincided with what was happening in Iran with our hostages. So this is all breaking as I arrive in the Middle East.
Right. So this is late '70s, early '80s, right? That's the time frame when this is all going
Right.
on.
This is 70, yeah, 79 through 85.
Right. So I think was the Iranian hostages that started in '79, I think, or 1980, around that.
That's correct. That's absolutely right. And Mecca was November of 79 as well. And then they burnt down the embassy in Pakistan because they said that the Mecca uprising was done by the CIA. So that a crowd went down to our embassy in Pakistan and they burned it to the ground. So a lot of stuff happening. And I was in the most orthodox Muslim country in the world.
Right. So let's just fast forward a bit. All this time in Saudi Arabia, the Spanish speaking stuff, you kind of fell on a couple of government agencies' radar, so to
Yeah, yeah.
speak.
I did. So in 1985, my contracts are over in the Middle East, and now I want to go back to the United States, and I want to go to graduate school in Arizona. And it's interesting. On the way back home to the United States, I stopped in Cairo because now I was really interested in this terrorism stuff. This thing, the kind of the latent police officer in me, the law enforcement in me was starting to bubble up. And I thought to myself, you know what? I know this culture pretty good, and I know what's happening in the culture, and I know that this stuff is coming our way. It's just a matter of time before it hits us. So I decided, I got to Egypt, and most tourists will go to the Egyptian Museum or they go to the pyramids. Not me. I'm going out to the grandstand outside Cairo where Anwar Sadat was assassinated, and I'm out there. It was bizarre. It was kind of creepy. It was out there with the taxi driver in the middle of nowhere with bullet holes that seemed still fresh, and I'm poking my finger in these bullet holes and saying, "Wow, Sadat and 11 dignitaries died right here on this spot because some blind sheikh named Omar Abdulrahman gave his blessing to kill Sadat." And then the rest of the story is kind of even weirder because you fast forward a few years and now I'm with this guy jaw to jaw with him on a street corner in Jersey City in Arabic, going at him in Arabic. So someone told me back then, this is what's going to happen in your future. I'd say, you're crazy.
Right. So yeah, I mean, well, listen, that would have been a true crime with the Sarge adventure for sure. I would have went to see the crime scene myself if I was out there. You can always see the pyramids. You can go to Google Earth to see the pyramids. So
Right.
that kind of stuff.
Mm.
So so you get a couple of recruiters after you now.
Right. Right. That's right. So in 85, so I start school in 86, graduate school. And of course, this is a school that's heavily recruited by CIA and the FBI. And I met an FBI agent at the school, and I heard him speak, and then he said, "I recall your name. I wanted to speak to you." And I said, "Well, I'm listening." And he said, "We could use someone with your talents. You speak Spanish. Could get you into the FBI under the Spanish language program. You speak some basic Arabic. You've been overseas. You know about terrorism. We actually, and your father is a cop, and that didn't hurt. It didn't hurt that he was a police officer. So that kind of helped me, I think. And so I said, "Yeah, sign me up." And I said, "But how about me?" And he said, "Well, as an FBI agent, you'll never be poor, but you'll never be rich." So he was upfront with me, but that began the process. I said I want in, and that began the process.
Right. So you had basically, so you had the FBI recruiting you, you had the CIA recruiting you. Totally two different jobs, right? Even and back then, when we're talking about mid '80s, was it still? You still had to be either a lawyer or an accountant, and still had to have 3 years work experience. Was it still like that back then?
Yeah, that's right. And so I went in as an older. I think the age cutoff was 35. I went in. I was 34, but my classmates were, as you said, Joe. They were accountants. They were lawyers. They were military. They were police officers as well. We had some police officers as well. So that was pretty much the bunch. And there were men and women. And we had a good group, a very very good class.
Right, and you had actually had a very special student, fellow student in your academy class in the FBI. Who tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I mean, while I'm there in the class of '89-7, who shows up as our new classmate but Jodie Foster, the actress in Silence of the Lambs, or Taxi Driver, I guess was her big movie, but she was going to make Silence of the Lambs, so they decided that it would be good PR for the FBI bureau that she attend these classes, and that so she was in our legal class, she was in our defensive tactics class. She was in the gym with us. She would run the Yellow Brick Road, which I think was like a 10K distance with us, and so she was with us kind of night and day for, I think it was like 3 weeks. And then at the end, when I graduated from Quantico, from the FBI Academy, she was in the crowd there in the audience, sitting right behind my parents and my wife.
Right, so that's pretty little interesting, right? Little tidbit, little historic thing about Silence of the Lambs, because I'm sure we have a lot of fans who have seen that movie, and maybe even fans of Jodie Foster. So that's actually a pretty cool side note. So let's talk about So you're in. So you get in the FBI. You're a former Brooklyn guy, Long Island. You figured you were going to New York City, right? And that didn't happen.
And yeah, thank God it didn't, because when they announce everyone and where they're going. Strange, you're going to, and I'm ready, ready to go. Yeah, New York, New York, the flagship, baby. I'm going to go to New York, and he says Newark, New Jersey, and I was just crushed. It was like inflated. Like, oh my God, it must be a mistake here. It must be a mistake. That was my third choice, Newark. So, but actually, Joe, it actually worked to my advantage, because had I gone to the New York field office, I would have been one of thousands of agents, and they told me that I would probably spend the first 6 months to 1 year doing applicant work, interviewing applicants for federal government jobs, just to get us some experience. Instead, I get to Newark, and someone had the foresight to put me on the JTTF. And so that's where I landed. Now, my boss at the time was not happy with that. He was not welcoming. And he told me straight up, he said, I don't know how you got here, but you're here. We'll have to coexist together. So, this was my welcome, or lack thereof. But anyway, regardless of that supervisor, the men and women that I worked with were like unbelievable. They were like, your A game. There was so many, Joe. There was so many groups, so many terrorist groups, so many violations. You had Abu Dhabi, PLO, IRA, JDL, Sikh terrorists, and everything in between. Libyans, you name it, we had it, and the Black Liberation Army as well.
Yeah, no. So for those that might not know, JTTF, short for Joint Terrorism Task Force, and then we have the Brooklyn shooting. Not the Brooklyn. No, it was in Manhattan. Meyer
Manhattan.
Kahani.
Meyer Kahani,
Right.
Rabbi Kahani is shot by an Islamist, jihadist, and his name is Syed Nozer. And
Right.
Syed Nozer, he shoots him, he runs off, he shoots another government official, I think like a postal officer, duty officer. Anyway, he's jailed, and this is the beginning, and I feel this to my core. This is really the beginning of Al Qaeda, right here. It's born right here. Now I know NYPD. And I remember Barry coming out and saying, "Yeah, hold your horses here. This is nothing more than a homicide. It's just some grievances, some Muslim guy against a Jew. And that's how it started. But there was much more to that, and things got moving after that.
Yeah, no, but I mean, if you look back in the history context of this whole thing, you had Kahani, you had the Brooklyn Bridge shooting. There was a lot of things that were happening. It was the kids, the bus full of Jewish kids that were going up the ramp, and then
Right,
these guys, the guys opened fire on them on
exactly.
going up the Brooklyn Bridge ramp. So there was lots of different things, and the same people. So this guy Nozair, who actually gets off of killing Kahani, tell everybody
Right.
where he ends up.
Yeah, I mean, so he ends up in Attica. Yeah, I believe he ended up in Attica, and then maybe he might have gone to some federal correctional facility. I'm not sure, but all of those characters, and I kind of liken them to a mafia gang. These were the jihadists that were in the New York metropolitan New Jersey area, and they were united. They were Muslim, and they hated Israel, and they hated the United States. That's what united them. And they had this pedigree where many of them had come out of Afghanistan fighting the Soviets. And ironically, we're helping these jihadists. We're supplying them arms and weapons to defeat the number one enemy, the Russians. And now the war ends, and all of these guys, these creeps in particular, they come back and they wash up our city. And now there's no war. They're twiddling their thumbs, and now, oh well, we hate Jews. We hate the United States. Well, we're gonna make it hell on earth for the citizens here, and they did, and they were from all over Middle East. They were Sudanese, Egyptians, Palestinians, Jordanians. They were from all over the Middle East.
Yeah, and Nozair ends up getting rearrested for the first World Trade Center bombing to boot.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and so and Joe, I had actually left the bureau. I had gone to another federal agency just before the first World Trade Center bombing. But again, I knew all of the players. I knew Mohammed Saleh, the bomber that had rented the Ryder rental truck. I knew Shalit, I think it was. I knew him, and some of the other players. I went out in the streets and I would pass them or be near the mosque and I would see them. So I was familiar with just about all of them except the Iraqi, the bomber himself. He came after I left.
So tell us how your business card ended up with one of the terrorists when this whole first World Trade Center bombing, when this whole thing collapses on them.
Yeah, it's wild. That is actually a wild thing because I was with a New Jersey state trooper, Kevin Tormay, and we had actually we had just been coming back a Christmas party at the FBI New York office. So we're coming back. We're going back to New Jersey, and of course we have to catch the train. I think it was the PATH train, and this is ironic. We right there under the World Trade Towers, right? So we're catching this train, and I see this. It looks like I knew he was Muslim, but he had the long beard going, and I just had this feeling that he was with the sheikh. So I said to Kevin, I said, I'm going to try to talk to that guy over there. I think he's, and Kevin says, oh, help yourself. You're crazy. You talk to 20 people. That's your problem. And I said, well, give me a few minutes. So I went over there and I sat down with this guy and I talked to him in Arabic, and his eyes are as wide as saucers. And I said, hey, you're with the sheikh. And he kind of denied it, but I could tell, he was hiding something. And I said, look, I know you're from there, and I you can help us out with Middle East stuff. And I think it would be the beginning of a beautiful relationship with me. And I gave him my business card, and he just kind of stared at it. And I said, listen, can I call you? Can you give me your number? And he said, no. And no. And I said, well, look, anytime, give me a call. I'd love to see you again. And that was the last time I would see him. He disappeared, and I got off, I think, at the first stop. And I said, well, look, anytime, give me a call. I'd love to see you again. And that was the last time I would see him. He disappeared, and I got off, I think, at the first stop. And I said, well, look, anytime, give me a call. I'd love to see you again. and he disappeared into the night. And then the next time I see him, he's splashed on every major newspaper on the front page of the country. And the headlines were "Face of Terror," and I'm looking at it and I'm going, holy, excuse me, language, holy shit! I know this guy. I tried to pitch him, and I told my wife, and before I went off to work, and she said, "Oh no, you must have the wrong guy." And I said, "No, no, it's not the wrong guy. It's the guy I tried to pitch." Then as soon as I got to work, I started to get phone calls from the FBI, from my squad mates, my former squad mates, from my supervisor, and they said, "Hey, we just did a search on Mohammed Alame's apartment. So tell me why your business card is showing up in his apartment. What's going on?" So, it was a long day.
It was a long day, but you were doing police work, right? So I mean, that's the whole thing. But at the time, I'm sure things were pretty chaotic, and then they find us, they're like, "Oh no," right? I mean, that kind of thing.
Yeah,
So
I
when
mean,
you're
I mean, that whole group were characters, and probably the biggest regret I have is as I was about to leave, I ended up in this was about 2 or 3 weeks before I left the bureau, the FBI. I was now transitioning over to another agency called the U.S. Agency for International Development, and I had been recruited by that agency by two ex-FBI agents. Shortly before I left, for some reason, I knew there was something going on in this group of terrorists, and so there had been a murder in Coney Island, and I think this was Shelby, and he was one of the alpha jihadists. But Omar Abdul Rahman, the sheikh, the blind sheikh, had him. I'm killed. So NYPD was working this homicide case of the Shalaby murder in Coney Island, and for some reason, and it's because my dad worked at the 60 at one time, and I just wanted to kind of say goodbye to it before I moved down to Virginia. But I went over to the 60 at night, and there was a desk sergeant, and I said, "Look, FBI, FBI, I'd like to take a look at the Shalaby stuff." And he said, "What do you care? You're dealing with foreigners." And I said, "That's why I care, because they're foreigners. Yeah, that's why." And then as I started digging through the boxes of evidence that they had pulled, or boxes of information, I started to see this military stuff, secret documents, confidential documents, how to make bombs, how to defeat tanks, all of this crazy stuff. And it was all coming from North Carolina, from the Special Warfare School in North Carolina. And that's when I thought, ooh, there's a problem. How is this guy getting confidential information, secret information from Fort Bragg, North Carolina? So, and then when I left, I turned everything over to my squad. I said, please keep your eye on this, follow it up. You're going to have to go to North Carolina. There's somebody, involved and is giving these documents to these jihadists in Brooklyn and New Jersey. And it turns out, and that's probably, I wish in retrospect, I wish I had stronger, because it turns out that this guy was Sergeant Ali Mohammed. He was an Egyptian military guy, came to the United States, married an American woman. I think he met her on the plane, and they were married the next day or something. And then he goes down to Fort Bragg, and now he's a translator in Fort Bragg. So he ingratiates himself with the Green Beret. And during his vacations, he would go to Afghanistan and fight. He would fight the Russians, and nobody didn't tell anybody that. Or he would go to Sudan, where he became Osama bin Laden's private security guy, his consultant. So this is something that slipped through my hands, and he ended up being part of the destruction of our embassies in Africa. And there's a book by Land about this guy. He was a double, triple agent, but the embassy in Nairobi, the embassy in Tanzania were destroyed, and he's the guy that scoped the embassies. It's a terrible story.
Yeah, no, I remember all that stuff when it was all going on back then. I mean, a lot of things back then. You look at it, and everything's easy to Monday morning quarterback these things, but there were so many signs, and you still see the signs today, right? And people are still ignoring them in certain aspects, and you kind of just shake your head, and then you just say, "Well,
It
you just hope
seems
that it doesn't happen again." But
Yeah, but here we are again, and we're still dealing with terrorism. We're still dealing with cartels, and this is like 35, 40 years later, Joe.
Yeah. So when you're in the DOJ now, is this when you switched over the agencies? Is this the USAID that
Hey, yeah, yeah, this is the same one that's been in the news with Elon Musk, and, big
yeah, the
balls, and
Doge. The
Doge, and
Doge.
that's the whole thing, right? And I'm saying that, I must be dreaming. This can't be happening to my old agency. But I worked in a kind of a small fraud unit with ex FBI agents, accountants, and some former IRS CID agents. And we worked in the United States. We worked globally. There was a lot of money going through AID, billions. And the Agency for International Development was providing aid to third world countries, and it was being administered by us federal employees and being overseen and watched by us at the Inspector General's office. So we had a lot of work. We worked all over the United States, and that work took me basically all over the world. Ended up getting assigned to Costa Rica and El Salvador as well. So, and what's interesting, Joe, is yes, the agency was made up. Most of the regular agency people, I would say, were kind of a liberal bent, if you will. But nobody really talked about politics. We didn't, that wasn't the talk around the table. It was about getting the mission done and making sure that the programs were effective and people were, getting their HIV shots or getting food to eat and survive. That was the mission. And what I see now is just totally changed.
Right, but I'm sure 30 years ago or 20 years ago, you would never imagine that your former agency would be in this in the basically, for a lack of a better adjective, crosshairs of
Never,
of the government.
never, never in a million years. But and that's just things change, right?
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, some of these things you just sit there, you just kind of shake your head, and then when I was doing the research with the book and everything, and then I see USAID, I'm like, no way, right? So at this point, we couldn't have had a better timing for your appearance today on the show. So
I guess, yeah.
but your time in the DOJ, and then you go into the OIG, which is the Officer Inspector General, right? So you're working lots of different cases. You end up in South America or Central America, right, in Costa Rica.
Yeah,
And
we started
tell us
off,
about that.
Joe. Yeah, I mean, we started off in Costa Rica, and that was a great assignment, probably the best assignment of my life, because you're in a beautiful country, and there's no war going on like El Salvador. This came out of the Civil War, but Costa Rica is just gorgeous. I mean, they call it, I think in Spanish they call it pura vida. The great life, pure life. And so, for me and my family, my wife ended up working at the embassy. She's a nurse, so she got a part-time job at the embassy. And then the kids loved it. And, you go to volcanoes on the weekends, and, you could choose, am I going to the Caribbean? It's only 2.5 hours this way. Or do I go to the Pacific? It's only 3 hours that way. I mean, it was just a gorgeous, gorgeous place. But there were a lot of Americans, a lot of Canadians, snowbirds, money come down and visit or live down there. And it was starting to get a little bit expensive, but it was a great assignment. And the only thing kind of marred it a little bit for me, only thing that made it a little bit made me feel uneasy is I got a phone call while I was down there from the FBI. And they said, we've been looking for you for almost 2 years and we're trying to find you. We need to tell you that your name has come up in a list. And I'm like, huh? What list? And they said, we have two separate reliable sources that say that you and another FBI agent and a CIA officer are on a Hezbollah list. And I'm like, oh, Jesus, just what I don't need to be on some Hezbollah list. I said, do you know exactly what this list is? And they said, no, we're trying to find that out. But he says, the unit chief says, Strange, are you packing? And I thought he meant like packing up my belongings to leave now. And I said, why should I be packing my clothes and stuff? And he goes, no, 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 packing like a weapon, like a gun. And I said, oh, geez, we don't carry here. We can't carry. We're not authorized to have weapons. Well, you better get together with the security officer from the diplomatic security officer over there, and they'll protect you. And it's just, it kind of rained on my parade, because after that announcement that I was on this Hezbollah list, and honestly, I'd never Hezbollah matters. I had worked every other Arab matter, but not Hezbollah. But I must have pissed somebody off along the way. And so
Yeah, it wasn't a dinner invite list, right? It wasn't a
no,
Christmas card list.
I don't think so. So yeah, he was always looking over my shoulder after that.
Right, and then you're also worried about your wife and your kids,
Yeah,
during all this thing. I mean, it's
yeah, exactly. So that
so
was
you end up going from Costa Rica right into a war zone, though, right, and going into El Salvador.
right. Yeah, exactly. So they after 1 year, government decided that Costa Rica would no longer be eligible for aid, overseas aid. So we locked up the doors, we closed the consulate, closed the embassy, the embassy stayed, but AID vanished. And so, I threw the kids in the van and the dog, we had a little Dalmatian, and put all this stuff in the car. And we drove up the Pan American Highway through all the volcanoes and all this, through Nicaragua and all these places. And we ended up in El Salvador. And let me tell you this much, El Salvador was not Costa Rica. El Salvador was not pura vida. It was, it just come out of a civil war, and a really brutal civil war. So, one of the first things I heard when I got there was, be careful, don't go into the zona rosa. We had our Marines were killed. They were assassinated at Chili's restaurant in downtown. So be very careful. So, that was another thing to watch. And it was a very dangerous place. One of our friends got carjacked, and she could speak Spanish. And she was a very brave lady. So she's arguing with the carjackers in Spanish. Please don't take my wedding ring. Please, not the wedding ring. Everything. Take the car. Take the money. And he's bartering with these carjackers. And they said, okay, senora, okay, you keep the ring and we take the keys. Goodbye. So this was happening. A friend of mine got killed, Jewish guy I knew. I met at the Marine Corps ball. He's an American businessman in El Salvador. We start to become friends. And the next thing you know, he's dead. These people came in his building and they wanted something, money. And he pulled out a gun, and there were 6 of them with guns. So, it was inevitable. So it was a dangerous place. Great people, wonderful people, but just they had been through so much.
So when you get into the next step is at the Officer of Inspector General, the OIG office, after all the South American trips?
Right. Yeah, kind of ended up, that job kind of ended on a sour note. I had a case I was working, it was an embezzlement case out of Haiti in Port-au-Prince. And that was a tough case with very little evidence. I went over there twice to try to make it. This is the first time I saw dead people in the street, I'd never seen that before. And everybody had a gun as well. So it was one of Port-au-Prince was just one of these places. It was a movie. So go down there. Case didn't work out. There was insufficient evidence, and the United Nations was involved, and they didn't want to send someone to testify. I mean, we knew what happened. We knew that this person, it was a political case, and that embezzled the funds, and there was no receipts, very few receipts. So good luck trying to make a case. So I had a prosecutor out of Miami, and said, I'm going to decline this case. There's just no, there's no future in this case. And I said, I absolutely agree. And so when I went back to Washington, D.C., my boss, who was new, said, no, I disagree with the prosecutor. We're going to make this case. Watch me. You come with me, and we're going to go down, and we're going to talk him out of that. We're going to make the case. So we fly down there. The prosecutor says, don't bother coming down. And so she's on the phone saying, "Oh no, no, I want to meet you. We're going to talk about this case. We're going to make the." He goes, "All right, come down here, but can't promise you anything." So we go down there, and we talk about the case. He says, "Hey, I'm declining this case," and she said, "No, you're going to work the case. You're going to make the case." And no, you can't tell me what to do. So uh, there was such a bad taste in her mouth about this whole case, and I just, you have that feeling that any capital that I had built up within this group had suddenly vanished because I didn't make this case. It was declined. So at that same time, Joe, somebody approached me from El Paso, Texas, former Secret Service agent, who's now the special agent in charge of the OIG, the Office of Inspector General for the Department of Justice. And he said, "Hey, kid, heard about you. I heard you speak Spanish. I could use someone like you. Would you come on down to El Paso and check us out? I think you'd really like it here." And so I took up on that offer. I never looked back, and it was probably the best thing for my career, because
So when
this guy. Yeah, go ahead.
Walden's got a question for you. What years were this going on with the El Salvador and those kind of things?
Right. So El Salvador, Costa Rica was 1994, and El Salvador was 1995. And so I left El Salvador in 1996, and I spent 2 years in Washington, D.C. to finish up with the Agency for International Development. And then the Department of Justice out in El Paso recruited me in 1998.
Mella's got a question for you. Says there's some crazy stories. Did your family go with you everywhere you were stationed?
Uh, yeah, where I was stationed, they would follow, and they went to nice schools. We always had a nice house. We you could afford maids, things of that nature. But I made a number of trips. Like one was pretty hairy. I almost lost my. This was to the Mosquito Coast in Nicaragua, and 2 plane trips, and then a boat trip out in the Caribbean, and then we hit a storm in this little boat, and we're taking in water, and I almost lost my life in that trip. But you wouldn't travel with your family for those types of trips. They stayed behind, and my wife was a nurse, basically with the embassies when we were over there.
So this might actually have answered that, but Jenny asked, "So what was your scariest situation Ken has ever been in?" So like, was it the boat incident, or is there something worse?
I mean, been in my life as far as investigations, or in this
Yeah,
in this in the
I
in
would
the
assume so.
feds.
Yes, I would
Well, I
say
mean,
with your overseas trips with the feds.
okay, with the feds, I would have to say that was pretty hairy. And I bring it up in the book, and yeah, I didn't think we were going to make it, and I thought we were going down, and just at the last minute, the storm let up a little bit, and we made it to some lagoon, and we stopped in the lagoon. We had to walk for miles to get to this little village where I would do my, where there was no electricity, and it was the land that forgot. It was unbelievable, and these people were the turtle people, the mosquito people of Nicaragua, and they had just come out of the Civil War as well. So it was a crazy, crazy place.
Was your wife not terrified for your safety all the time? Asked Sheila.
Great question, Sheila. Great question. No, not really, because she didn't know what was happening. She's so busy with our twin daughters at the time, and they were small. She spent a lot of time with them, and I didn't want to tell her all what I was doing at the time, because some of it was borderline not safe.
So, when you were in the OIG, now we're getting back to this because we were just answering some of those questions. OIG is kind of like an internal affairs kind of situation.
Exactly right. That's exactly right. And so, on paper, it's to oversee any waste, fraud, and abuse with the Department of Justice programs, or with the Department of Justice personnel. And so it's an internal affairs type function. And when we got to the southwest border, where the cartels were, and where the money, the corruption was rampant, and where our border patrol was just like recruiting like crazy just to get the numbers up. Uh, we did a lot of work, put a lot of people in jail, and Oh boy, it's you wouldn't believe. Well, you could believe it, Joe. I'm sure
Right.
you could.
But it's like, yeah, like we're gonna stop you for like that because it's like history repeating itself, right? So now you're talking about investigating because they were mass hiring border patrol agents and all the other things going along with it. And now we're doing the same thing. Now they've dropped the standards. They got rid of the college requirements or the work experience.
Yeah,
And because
terrible.
usually federal agencies, you need a 3-year work experience, right? Or a law degree or an accounting degree. So they're
Right.
dropping all these standards. So what year was that when you were doing that?
Yeah, so that was 1988. Sorry, 1998, 1999, and they're rushing through all these kids and young men and women, and
And we're doing it again.
and and the stupid cases that would come to our desk, like on one Monday, I remember like somebody said, "Hey, boss, two border patrol agents they drove across into Juarez, into Mexico, and they had too much to drink, and they picked up some prostitutes and they tried to drive them back into the United States without any passports or anything. Well, that didn't work out, did it? Didn't work out. So
Ugh.
that and then creepy stuff too. Some people that were human trafficking in women. Like we had one guy that was just trafficking in women, and then they would say, "Oh, they're my cousin, they're my sixth cousin," and this is a border patrol agent. So some very very sad cases, and then these young people would turn up and they'd get together and they'd be entrapped, honey trap over on the other side, and then they would do something illegal, and then the cartels had them and then they could just do what they want with them. So we saw this time and time again. In fact, it got so crazy, Joe, with all of these new border patrol people without the lack of ethics or that type of training, and I would just sit down with them and they would confess to me within minutes, and instead of making cases against them because there was so many, I would just say, so what are you going to do about this? And right then and there, they would say, Mr. Strange, I'm going to quit. And I'd say, are you sure? Yes, I'm going to quit. Yeah, and we both knew what they had done. Taking money, this, that, and the other thing. But there was so much crime that we just didn't have time to make these cases. So these kids they would quit and they would be gone.
And I worry about the same thing that could be happening now, 30 years later or so, 25 years later, where we're trying to hire as many border patrol agents as we can.
I hope
And
not,
you
Joe. I mean, it was like shooting fish in a barrel. It was really sad.
and you just hope that they have the apparatus in place to do these investigations, you know.
Right. Yeah. You would hope. Yeah. I
Yeah,
don't.
hope's not a plan, as you know.
But I worked for a very good inspector general. His name was Glenn Fine, and he really transformed our office. And he passed off the baton to Michael Horowitz, who has got a great reputation.
Just me's got a question here. Says I know it's a little bit off topic, but did you ever watch The Americans, the TV show? I guess with the Russian spies.
Yeah. No, I'm sorry. I mean, I think I've seen one or two of the shows, but yeah, I didn't see a lot of the episodes.
But
But
it's kind of similar, right? In regards to spies and all kinds of crazy stuff that you were dealing with.
oh, absolutely, absolutely. Lots of spies. In fact, one of the first things I did with the FBI was actually babysitting a Russian spy. He had defected, and that was really it ended up to be a tragic story. But because he had PTSD and because he had fought in the Russian military, because he was an alcoholic, but we actually got pretty close to him, and he would never get his family over. The Russians wouldn't let him see his family, and they could never send the family. So he ended up drinking himself to death. And I received a letter from him. It was the last time he wrote to anybody, and it was to me. And he kind of spilled his heart out about his life and where he was going, and he was just depressed out of his mind, and he died. So he drank himself to death.
Yeah, lots of victims and all these kind of stuff. I mean, it just goes from. Let's just talk with a couple of minutes that we have left.
Yeah.
Just law enforcement in general right now in 2025.
Yes. Right.
What kind of advice? Because we have some students that watch the show, and some of them are interested in. We have a lot of people that are interested, of course, in true crime. But law enforcement in general, what's your consensus on how things are right now?
Yeah, I mean, I see it as a very tough environment for those considering law enforcement. Now, you and I know that it can be a very satisfying position and job, and you're serving the public if you look at it that way. But if you go into this profession and you end up in some of the cities that we've seen, New York comes to mind, or Philadelphia, L.A. out here, and you want to think twice about becoming a law enforcement officer out here because will the Justice Department out here, will your attorneys, the DAs, will they have your back, or will you get beaten up on the street and then they arrest the guy and then turn him loose the next day to beat you up again?
Yeah.
So no, I wouldn't join the police force in some of these cities. Other places, I would definitely think about it. It really depending on your judicial support.
Right. And we know that's a problem too in
Yes.
many of the major cities. And
Yeah.
it leads to what the what the police cynic, so to speak, right? The public is against you,
Yes.
the prosecutors against you, the job's against you, and it kind of
Right.
sets this in motion. I mean, it's a great job, and they've kind of led to its demise, so to speak. There's recruiting problems
Yeah.
throughout the entire country. I mean, of course, some of the suburbs are doing well, but the
Yes.
suburbs
Right.
are few and far between in regards to hiring. So the
That's
cities
right.
are really hurting badly.
Yeah. Yeah. And you go. Like I spent a lot of time in Wyoming and Utah, and out there it's a little bit different. And again, I think it's politically driven. You find more satisfaction. The law enforcement has more satisfaction doing the work out there in some of those states. So it really varies. But Joe, it's an honorable profession. You've done it, and I know you were a tremendous cop. My father did it, tremendous cop, and in some ways, I'm kind of when my father passed away in 2020, I was kind of glad because I don't think he'd recognize policing anymore. It's just so spotty.
Oh yeah, and I'm sure you have the same conversations with your friends like I do with mine, and we just sit there and we watch what's going on, and we're just like, "Are you kidding me with this?" I
I
mean,
know, I know.
enough with the TikTok cops too. I'm tired of seeing cops dancing all over the place. I mean, like, come on. I mean, are we?
Yeah,
Is this what you call community outreach? If that's the case, where
yeah.
you're failing again at this.
Don't want it. Oh
So
boy.
we know we can find you at kennethstrange.com. We have, like I said, our trusty dusty Nightbot is sharing. That's not
Oh,
that one. Sorry, Nightbot is sharing your book. There it is. Wrong one. There it is. Cops.
hello. Yes,
A
hello.
Cop's
Night.
Son, one G Man's Fight Against Jihad, Global Fraud, and the Cartels. There's a copy. You can pick up a copy there. So you can get it on Amazon. You can get it at Barnes and Nobles too, right? You can get it anywhere.
My publisher is Post Hill Press, and as you said, you can get it on my author website, which is KennethStrange1word.com.
Right. And if sometimes people ask if they can get signed copies through your website, is that something that they can do, or is that it's
I,
just
I'll
basically
make
done
it.
through Amazon?
No, I'll make it happen. I'll make it happen.
Okay. They can
Yeah.
send you an email and they can. So if you're interested in getting a signed copy of Kenneth's book, go to kennethstrange.com, send him an email through his contact page, and he'll work all that out for you.
Yeah.
Ken, it's been a pleasure. We'll have to do this again.
Yeah. Same here, Joe.
When we can tell stories. I mean, because we usually don't get a chance to talk about terrorism. So that's pretty cool in regards to some of those things. Uh, but we'd love to have you back in a future show when your other book comes out.
Thank you, Joe.
What's the title of the new book that's coming out?
The new book will be called Land of Sand. Land of Sand is a coming of age love story. It's a comedy and it's a travelogue. But it also my wife appears in the book. There's a love story.
And you can find all that information on kennethstrange.com, or you can find them on an Amazon page too.
Right.
Ken, it's been a pleasure. You hang out 1 second with us.
Sure,
Everybody
sure,
else,
sure, Joe.
you guys have a great night. We'll talk to you soon. Bye, everybody.